Hey, hi. Welcome to Someone Else's Movie, the original podcast where an actor, writer, director, or nebulous industry figure gives a little love to a movie they didn't make. I'm Norm Wilner, senior film writer for Now Magazine, and this is the other thing I do. My guest this week is Lee Dong, a writer and director making his feature debut with Stealing School, a dark comedy starring Celine Tsai as an Asian-Canadian student accused of plagiarism and forced to prove her innocence before an academic tribunal 1 week before graduation. The film premiered on Vimeo On Demand last Friday, and it's available on digital and on demand as of today. Lee picked Ocean's 11, Steven Soderbergh's 2001 remake of the 1960 Lewis Milestone picture where the Rat Pack swanned around Las Vegas planning a casino heist. The premise is the same, more or less, with a guy named Danny Ocean getting a bunch of pals together to take down multiple casinos, but Soderbergh and screenwriter Ted Griffin reworked and resuscitated the property into a glorious entertainment. You got George Clooney, Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Carl Reiner, Xiaobo Quinn, Elliot Gould, Bernie Mac, Eddie Jemison, Scott Conn, Casey Affleck, Andy Garcia, and Julia Roberts, and they're clearly having the best time and letting us enjoy every second of it. Seriously, if you haven't seen it, you're really missing out. This is Someone Else's Movie.
Ocean's 11 is, and I'm going to say it, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me, Soderbergh's most enjoyable movie. It's a really hot take. Some people would say Traffic, Aaron Brockovich, whatever. I just think that you can throw Ocean's 11 on in whatever mood you are, whatever state you are in your life, and you will enjoy it. Ocean's 11 is just it's almost like comfort food in the heist genre. I don't know. Would you agree with that?
That's not a bad way to put it. It does have my single favorite shot in his entire filmography. So yeah, I'm inclined to agree on the comfort food.
And which shot is that? It's not the Bellagio shot, is it?
No, those are pretty. But no, it's the shot outside. I guess it's a restaurant or a club or somewhere in LA. It's when Danny goes to pick Rusty up and Rusty's running his poker game. And we have the round table of everybody who was on the WB in 1999, 2000, which is a great, weird little cameo. But the shot of the two of them leaving the club. And everybody swarming, Joshua Jackson and Topher Grace.
I was going to bring that up. I was going to bring that scene up as well. I think that, movies try to portray life in so many different ways. But whenever they try to portray a struggle in the way that making a movie is a struggle, they do it really well. I've always held in my deepest of hearts that Ocean's 11 is a movie about making a movie. It's not a movie about a heist, about a robbing bank. It's a movie about making a movie.
Okay.
You can draw a direct line between George Clooney, director, Rusty, the AD, Don Cheadle, the cinematographer, the two Mormon guys, the PAs or whatever. I just think that it's such a joyful experience to make a movie, as I've been lucky enough to experience. But I think that Ocean's 11 is secretly, or maybe not so secretly, about the joy of making a movie. It's a bunch of ragtag people pulling off a job, essentially, that they frankly have no right in pulling off from the beginning. Yeah.
Huh. And they do actually make a little movie. I mean, there is pre-taped footage involved in the heist,
do, yeah,
right?
You're right. They actually make a movie. That's actually true. I didn't think of that.
There is a result there.
That's true, yeah.
It's funny. The one I always pull up is Nolan's Inception, which is about, convincing people to buy into your story and then executing it at a certain level. But
Inception's great on a level where it's where basically it's saying no, the audience does not believe this, but we're going to make the audience believe this.
Yeah.
Which is actually another level of filmmaking that I am not ready to discuss, but Chris Nolan really went there. Chris Nolan's no, I know you don't believe this, but I'm going to make you believe it. I thought that was really interesting in Inception.
Yeah.
But you're right. Inception is also kind of has some heisty elements, would you say?
Sure,
Yeah, right?
Yeah. But
guns, chasing cars.
Yeah, Bond movie armies showing up in the third act. But it's not as much fun, right? It doesn't, because it's a Chris Nolan film and it has to have all this heavy backstory and the dead wife stuff and the moral question.
The dead wife stuff.
It's his thing.
The dead wife stuff.
It's his thing.
I'm so glad Soderbergh cut the dead wife stuff from his movie, because that would have dragged down Ocean's 11 tremendously. I recently looked at Ocean's 11 very carefully to the point where I looked at the script, or the last shooting script that I could find.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I saw the stuff that Soderbergh cut out, and he cut out a lot. And it seemed like every cut that he made was accurate, was the right move. He was basically, in the script, they would try to explain certain plot points in dialogue.
Oh, yeah.
And Soderbergh was like, no, we can just shoot that and not have the dialogue. And it was really interesting to see like all these like complicated plot points where people are talking about it, but they're not in the final movie because Soderbergh was like, no, we'll just shoot it. It's fine. Which I thought was really like a nice lesson in directing for me. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing I think we talked about this briefly. We spoke yesterday on an unrelated thing. And I think I mentioned, like, I basically recently just decided that there's no point in pretending, like, Soderbergh is my favorite American filmmaker, and period. Like,
he's amazing. Have you seen Schizopolis?
I did.
That's a deep cut.
Oh, yeah.
That's a deep cut.
I saw that at TIFF. I interviewed him for that, actually. I think that might have been the first time we met.
Bro, I love Schizopolis more than any moviegoer should actually love Schizopolis. It is very, very weird. It's the kind of thing where it's like, you're not making any money off of this movie, but you did it for yourself. And Ocean's 11 felt like he was trying to do, he like picked a genre, like the heist movie, if you can count that as a genre.
Sure.
And he was like, I'm just going to try to do this as best I can, as the most pure form of the heist movie that I can. And he did it, but he did it in his own way, obviously, because he can't stop himself from being Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah, it's amazing, his joy in process, right? Like one of his running things is the way institutions break down and how individuals are responsible for maintaining the social contract. Like that, I think that's the overarching theme of his entire career, really, starting with marriages and infidelity and sex lies and going all the way through to what he's doing now. Like it's always about people betraying each other, and by virtue of doing so, it's betraying the larger system. And
I agree. I think there's a certain amount of I don't know what the right word is, but like scrampiness, like just like these sort of almost underdog figures, even though they're not really underdogs, but they feel like they're underdogs.
Yeah.
I guess that's a lot of movies, to be honest.
Sure.
Soderbergh does it really, really well. And, George Clooney and Brad Pitt were the literal biggest movie stars on Earth at the time that this movie came out. So to make them seem like they had a challenge ahead of them was something that Soderbergh probably found a little bit interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, while still letting them be like dapper and gorgeous and perfectly put together and unflappable.
Were they perfectly put together, Norm? Were they perfectly put together?
Oh, I think they were. I mean, that's part of the disguise, right? Like it's part of the skin that they're wearing.
I went back and I actually looked up in preparation for this podcast what year Night at the Roxbury was released. It was released in 1998.
Yeah.
It was 3 years before Ocean's 11. So in Night of the Roxbury, they were essentially making fun of dudes wearing shiny shirts. Like that was like a gag.
Sure.
And in Ocean's 11, Brad Pitt's like, no, I'm going to wear the shiny shirt and I'm going to pull it off somehow. It just seemed very, very weird. I don't know what he was trying to do. It was an interesting decision on all parts, but like, I don't know. Fashion in the early 2000s was weird, but I was just like, was Soderbergh making fun of the shiny shirts, or was he being like, no, this is actually what we're doing in 2001. People are wearing shiny shirts. I don't know. What did you think?
I think Pitt was making fun of it, and Soderbergh was letting him.
You think Pitt was making...
Yeah, because this is also 2 years after Fight Club, where he played Tyler Durden, who is dressed outlandishly.
That is true.
Right?
That's a great point.
What you're seeing is, with Brad Pitt, is a guy in full control of his image, and it's something that nobody ever really gives him credit for. But, he's a beautiful man. He like just pure aesthetics in that period from about 92 straight through. What was Thelma and Louise? 90, 91? From then to about 2005, he's aged into a really interesting look, and he's still very handsome. But if you were to,
I agree.
Yeah, if you were to build a human in a box, that would come out.
But I'm just saying, if we knew a woman friend back in 2001, and we were like, if you saw this guy wearing this shirt in the club, would you laugh him out of the club, or would you actually think he was good looking? I don't know what the answer is to that. I think you would laugh him out of the club. Like, no matter how good looking you are, those shirts were ridiculous, in my opinion.
But I also think that's strategic because he doesn't want to be taken seriously so he can scam people. I think Rusty is dressing that way consciously, and Pitt knows it. Pitt knows his guy. I mean, this isn't too far off from, Fight Club was 2 years earlier, but then there was 12 Monkeys in 95, and California the year before that, where he's just purely scuzzy, and 12 Monkeys, he's running around in a tuxedo.
Do you think he went up to Soderbergh and he was like, listen, I think this guy wears really shiny shirts, and that's his whole thing. And Soderbergh's like, all right, man, do whatever you want to do. I'm not going to say no to Brad Pitt.
Yeah, well, but I also think Soderbergh trusts these people, right? Like, if you're going to work with him, he doesn't do a lot of flyers. Like, he doesn't take chances with people. He knows what he's getting. And I think it's weird that, unless I'm missing something really obvious, the Three Oceans films are the only films he's made with Pitt, right? He hasn't collaborated with him the way he did with Clooney.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And I think Pitt just loves the challenge of working with people who will both let him do what he wants and also steer him in a certain direction.
Well, I want to ask you about this because I think one of the appeals of the film is that it feels like a joke. It feels like a joke that we, the audience, are in some way in on.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's the beauty of this film specifically.
In the shot that you mentioned, Topher Grace is swarmed by people, and Brad Pitt and George Clooney are walking out and no one cares. That's funny in a way that we live in the real world. We see that as hilarious. But, like, in the world of the movie, it makes sense because they're not Brad Pitt and George Clooney. But it's like a joke that Soderbergh's showing us. What do you think?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I think it's part of the fantasy, right? Like, imagine a world where George Clooney and Brad Pitt in 2001 can wander around unmolested and underestimated. And then, of course, he doubles down on it in Ocean's 12 with the Julia Roberts thing, which is also...
Oh, my God. Incredible. Yeah. Incredible. I could go... I almost chose Ocean's 12 for this podcast, but I thought that was like too crazy.
Well, we can range through the whole trilogy if you want to. I mean, I think there's definitely stuff in there. And
well, like another thing about the inside joke thing is when George Clooney joins the poker game. I don't know if you caught this, but when Brad Pitt walks in, he's having a throwaway line where George Clooney says, "Well, that's really difficult to transition from TV to film, isn't it?" And Topher Grace goes, "Not for me, dude." And it's hilarious because obviously George Clooney did transition from TV to film.
Yeah.
And like, it feels like Soderbergh saying to us, like, this is hilarious, right? Like, you're in on the joke. You, the audience, are in on this silly thing that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that's what I like about Soderbergh as a filmmaker, too. He's perfectly happy to show you the inner workings, the nuts and bolts. Like that's what Scotopolis is all about, how you make a film, how you make a Godardian narrative that twists around on itself and still let the audience enjoy themselves. He's just such a pleasurable filmmaker. And then, something like Logan Lucky, where none of it really matters and it's all going to be fine and nobody cares, but you can still enjoy the ride. I really like it.
I'm not sure Logan Lucky makes sense on a second viewing, which I haven't done. I'm a Soderbergh. By the way, I should say I'm a Soderbergh super fan. He is my favorite filmmaker. He was the one who made me look at film in a different way. If I may digress a little bit.
Please.
In Solaris. Do you remember the Soderbergh Solaris?
Oh, yeah. Actually, I was just talking to somebody about that. Yeah. It comes up. It's the one that I keep humping because I think it's the only one of his films, maybe that and Kafka, that isn't available in HD anywhere. You just can't find a Blu-ray of it.
Wow. Well, Kafka, I understand. Kafka was, Yeah. But when I was in high school, I wanted to be a novelist because I thought writing was the only true art. I didn't think of filmmaking as an art.
Okay.
And I remember sitting in Solaris, the Steven Soderbergh Solaris, and I'll go through Solaris real quick. Solaris is about George Clooney. His wife kills herself, and George Clooney goes to a space station to a planet that recreates his wife from his memory. Right?
Yep.
That's basically the plot. So we learn about George Clooney's wife from flashbacks, and we see George Clooney's wife made from his memories in the space station. And they look completely different. In the flashbacks, the wife was kind of like scowly, kind of like a hot mess. Her hair wasn't very well done, and she was just like not a very pleasurable screen presence. But in the version of his wife that's recreated from the alien planet, she's like beautifully lit, every hair in place, just a perfect beauty. And I was watching the movie and I remember thinking to myself, man, it's almost as if like we remember people as better than they are. And I was like, oh my God, we totally remember people as better than they are. And that was the moment that I realized that filmmaking was a true art, because this guy was able to activate a deep truth about humanity, what it means to be human, without dialogue, without words. He just did it with story and images, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
And that was the moment that I realized that filmmaking was like as much of an art as not writing novels.
Yeah, and that's a great place to learn that lesson too, because if you suddenly discovered that Soderbergh, because again, I think he is unparalleled at that actual, like, what would you call it, montage, at actually creating relationships in space through editing and memory and emotion. I mean, just his decision to use 40 seconds of a Ken Loach movie from 1963 at the end of the line meet and just break your heart open. It's genius. And I've interviewed him enough over the years to know it's consistent. Like, he doesn't luck into this stuff. He
knows what he's doing.
Yeah, he said he didn't think the line would work until he took it apart and put it back together again. And like, there's that great commentary track with Len Dobbs where they argue over the meaning of the film. And
oh my God. One of the great director commentaries, or commentaries in history.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, just really tense the whole way through.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Just fantastic.
And then they work together again. But what I was going to say is that when you see him do something that's as purely linear and candy colored and fun as Ocean's 11, it's not a dumb movie. Like, he's not taking his brain away, and he's still applying his entire skill set to it. He's just doing it in the service of this really fun, inclusive, welcoming film where you just get to play.
I remember when Roger Ebert reviewed the movie, he wrote something like, and I'm paraphrasing, but he was like, even classically trained pianists need to bust out the honky tonk once in a while on the piano.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really funny line when I was, 17 or 18 or whatever. But as I've grown, I was like, I actually don't agree with that. I think this is like an excellent exercise in craft, like very precise, like really, really trying to honor the heist genre, if you want to call it that, in ways that are very ingenious, not really making fun of it, and really, like, I don't know, I thought it was like a very respectful way to make that kind of movie. I didn't think it was honky tonk. I didn't think he was just like having fun. I mean, obviously he was having fun, but I thought that he took it very seriously.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I don't think he could throw something away. Like, I don't think he could just sort of goof around. And even when he is enjoying himself, I think he's still going to make sure the lighting is right and go for the color timing that he wants and make sure everybody else is giving a real performance. I don't think anybody is slacking in this.
Right. Right.
He told me once that these are his versions of superhero movies. They're the closest he can come to a Marvel movie, where you're just watching.
They are franchises.
Yeah, exactly. It's a franchise, but it's also a celebration of like Ubermenschen, of people who are specifically phenomenally gifted at what they do. And I think that's why they're so much fun, because we're allowed to enjoy all of that.
And the movie draws attention to the fact that these are the biggest movie stars on Earth. Mm-hmm. And that he just... I don't know if it necessarily draws attention to the fact that he just won the Oscar for Traffic, 4 months ago. I don't think he knew he was going to win the Oscar for Traffic. No. But I think it draws attention to the fact, these are, characters. But they're also, literally George Clooney and Brad Pitt. And, we should laugh at these scenarios that we put George Clooney and Brad Pitt into.
Yeah.
And Julia Roberts as well, obviously, who's fantastic in the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's the old... Hitchcock used to do it, right? He would cast an actor for their persona and then turn it against them.
They killed him off in the first act.
Sure, yeah. I'm thinking of, Cary Grant in North by Northwest, fumbling through everything. Right. Just being hapless instead of the suave, determined symbol of Hollywood capability that we all assumed he was, although he was always good at comedy. But the sense that this narrative that in Ocean's 11 that you are seeing, do you want to watch George Clooney in a nice suit run around a casino? We'll do that for 2 hours, but we'll also insert just enough pathos so that you understand that he longs to win this woman back and that she's doing the bantering and he refuses. That scene at the table.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, where she just refuses.
that scene at the dinner table, she is landing haymakers on George Clooney. Like, the dialogue in that scene was very... upon repeat viewings, I was like, this is incredible. Where he's like, they say I paid my debt to society. Funny, I didn't get a check. Like, she's just knocking him out with these one-liners, and I thought that was, like, just really great dialogue. And Julia Roberts, I guess she must have been the biggest movie star on Earth at this point. The biggest female movie star on Earth.
Also, just coming off Erin Brockovich with Soderbergh, just won the Oscar for that.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. That's true. So it was just like, she was... I remember not thinking that scene was that interesting or important the first time I saw it, but upon repeat viewings, I was like, the dialogue here is awesome.
Yeah.
She is just like really trying to hurt his feelings, and she's successful. Yeah. I would say. Yeah.
Well, and that's what makes it, sweet, I guess is probably the wrong word, but that's what makes it touching, is that he just takes it. Like, he's not trying at all to impress her. She is smacking him back over and over again. What was the other one? Does he make you laugh? He never made me cry.
He made me cry, and also, like, you're a liar and a thief. I don't do that anymore. Lie, steal, or something. It's like lie. No, steal, lie. I only lied about being a thief. And just, like, all these, like, really, really cool... They almost sound stilted and, like, very writerly, when you write something that like sounds really clever in writing. But they're delivered really, really well, and they feel really natural. And I think it was Julia Roberts and George Clooney, they were the two biggest movie stars on Earth at that time, and they had really great chemistry, I would say. I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how it would rank against the George Clooney, Jennifer Lopez chemistry, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it feels very much like a commentary, or at least a reflection of that, right? Because the great cocktail bar scene in Out of Sight, or the hotel bar scene in Out of Sight, when you have that sort of incredible chemistry and just sheer electricity between two actors, and he doesn't try to recreate it, because I think that's intentional. I think that his Clooney's entry into that scene feels almost like an echo, and then they just don't go there. He absolutely refuses to give us that.
I think you're right. I think Soderbergh was like, I know what you're expecting, but I'm going to give you something a little bit different. Yeah. If I had one gripe, if I don't really have a lot of gripes with this movie, but if I had one, I don't know how you feel about this. And this is something that you kind of have to do for this kind of movie, was the villain,
Andy Garcia.
The Andy Garcia character. So here's the thing that I notice about franchises is the first movie in a franchise, you can't make the villain be too showy. You just can't. Okay. And Andy Garcia was not... He was both scary, but he was not. And he was serious, but he was not. I would have preferred a better villain. Like in Ocean's 12, the Night Fox was a much, much richer, better villain. But Andy Garcia, I don't know. I didn't feel like he was on the George Clooney's level. Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I can tell you my theory. I think the reason Terry Bennett isn't a monster, although he hides it, he conceals it. I think the reason it works is because we have to believe that Tess could be with him. We have to believe that there's a legitimate reason that she's with him. You're saddled with it by the plot that Danny has to get her back.
It never was believable to me. Yeah. It never felt believable to me. As Zerga said, she's too tall for him. As we all know, she's too tall for him, and very, very cheap shot in a man's height. By the way, I don't appreciate that. But it never felt like he was the right villain, or that he was strong enough to battle George Clooney's character in that movie. You know what I mean?
He just has to be enough of a dick that we want him to get taken down.
And you know what? In the script that I read, he was even more of a dick.
Oh, yeah?
He had a lot more dialogue where he was very dickish, I suppose, is what I would say. And a lot of that got taken out because I guess Soderbergh felt like that wasn't needed. But he was a lot more unlikable, I would say. Yeah.
Interesting. I should read one of these scripts.
Yeah. I was really surprised. Yeah. I was really surprised. Yeah. By the way, I've seen the movie like 5 times by the time I read the script. As I was reading the script, I had no idea what was going on. it just like it almost doesn't matter, right? Like it was describing things that were happening, and I was like, I don't care. It's almost like the heist doesn't matter because I don't know. Would you say the movie is about the heist, or is the movie about a bunch of ragtag people coming together to pull off a job?
Certainly, we don't spend a lot of time watching the mechanics of it, and if we did, it would spoil the fun. The heist is incidental in as much as there's really no doubt that it's going to be pulled off. And I think the other thing that liberates him is that he's making a remake. So we know where it's going to go. And it's not That's the kind of movie where everybody's going to get shot in the face at the end. It's just not.
I should admit that I have not seen the original.
Oh, you don't need to.
I've only seen Ocean's 11. I love Soderbergh. I just want that to be the only Ocean's heist movie that exists. I'm not going to go back and watch the Michael Caine version. Is that what it is?
Oh, no, it's Frank Sinatra. It's Sinatra, Dean Martin. Michael Caine is the Italian job.
I have a hard time believing it's going to be better.
Oh, it's not. It's really not. It's kind of interesting. I would recommend sometime when you're bored out of your mind, take a look at it just to see what Soderbergh did differently, which is everything. The one thing he kept was the structure is very similar, but that's about it. What the original Ocean's 11 is an excuse for Sinatra and the Rat Pack to hang out in Vegas while they were performing.
You could exactly argue that the purpose of Ocean's 11, the new one, is an excuse for Brad Pitt and George Clooney and Matt Damon and Andy Garcia and Julia Roberts to hang out.
Oh, yeah.
You can exactly argue that.
And that is the quality that the Soderbergh film has that the original doesn't, which is what's fascinating about it. So what the original Ocean's 11 was literally produced to give them something to do while they were playing a casino at night. They were just booked in a Las Vegas residency.
I did not know that.
And it was let's make amazing, a movie also. And you can really tell that people aren't into it and they kind of want to go home and they're all a little tired. And there's one shot where it's really clear that Dean Martin is falling asleep in his chair just because he was up late the night before performing. And, most of that was an act. He wasn't really drunk on stage and all of that. But you can actually see tired entertainers in the original film.
Well, in contrast to that, wouldn't you say you could feel the joy of everyone in this movie, the joy of making the movie? Like, everyone seems like they're just having a great time delivering their lines, doing their job. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's the, somebody once, I can't remember who, it might have even been Ebert, but somebody described the Austin Powers films as a party that you're not invited to. Like, everybody there is having a blast. But we're just going, yeah, I guess that was fun. I suppose that's entertaining.
Yeah.
This movie, this movie gives you a seat. You are invited to be part of the group. You get to feel that, you could probably be at a craps table 2 over and watch these guys.
It really does feel like we're in on the joke. Like Soderbergh kind of lets us in on it, or, does his best to let us in on it. Like, we're laughing at how... I guess that's the best way to describe it. Like, it feels like you're in on the joke as an audience. It doesn't feel too stilted or pretentious on his part.
Soderbergh just wants you to feel the pleasure that everyone is taking in doing this. And, they're all, I agree. They're betting on whether or not somebody can pull something off.
Jin's gonna short the landing. Yeah.
And then, but that beautifully sets up the bit towards the end where he gets hurt and has to do it anyway, and we get to bet on whether or not he'll make it. Like, everything is part of the pleasure. It's all enjoyment is compulsory. You are invited into this world, and you're just allowed to take pleasure in all of it.
I always think in filmmaking it's a challenge to do basically, essentially try to do a trope. In a good way, in an original or interesting way.
Sure.
So I don't know if you've seen the Rick and Morty episode where it's about a heist.
Oh, the heist. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, the entire episode is Rick trying to round up a crew, it's making fun of heist movies where like you round up the crew and somebody says, "You son of a bitch, I'm in." Right? It's incredible. It's so funny. And Soderbergh's like, all right, I gotta have a scene where I'm rounding up a crew. Like, that has to be in the heist movie. And I thought that he did that so well and so interesting, and in a way that, was very him. But yeah, doing a trope like that is something that I do not envy at all as a filmmaker. Like, to try to do something like that in an original and funny way is, I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, I think it's both harder than it sounds and easier than it sounds because our brains are wired to accept that story, to go for that narrative.
Right.
But he also finds ways to. It's the purity of introduction, just the way that everyone is given that tiny little moment where you know, you get Basher and his backstory, you get Ruben at his table, you know, at his outside breakfast table, the largesse of this man who definitely speaks to an older generation, and then that becomes a thing in Ocean's 13 too, where certain actors became older, and therefore the movie had to acknowledge it. With both Elliot Gould and Carl Reiner as Saul, there's just this sense that we're watching these guys do the one last job thing, even though that's not the point of it, right? Like
while the character is saying, "All right, man, one last job," you know, like I'll do it. Which is kind of like another thing where it's like you're in on like it's weird meta joke, if you would call it that.
Oh yeah,
I don't know what to call it. Yeah.
Even if it isn't fully meta in the way that some of his other, or the way that Ocean's 12 is, you do get this sense that you could be watching something that is one-dimensional, right? Like you could take absolute superficial pleasure in this movie because it's fun and it's pretty and everybody's wearing great clothes and it's just a really well-made movie. But yeah, it rewards additional engagement and investment. Just that little, you mentioned his name, but we haven't really talked about what Matt Damon is doing. But like, this guy he's effectively the audience surrogate. He feels outclassed. He doesn't know who he's supposed to be. Like, his dad was really good at this, but he doesn't know who he is. We would be like that too. Like, with surrounded by these people, we'd feel like
he's sort of an audience proxy where things have to be explained to him, but theoretically explained to the audience. Sure. Like, he's sort of an audience proxy. I liken him on a movie like as the supporting young actor who thinks he should have a much bigger part, but you know, he's not getting it. But you know, he thinks that he can do the lead role, but you know, no one's letting him do it. I really think that this is a movie about making a movie. That's just my personal theory.
No, it's a good theory.
So in that scenario, that's what Matt Damon is. Yeah. But yeah, no. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
And the film also acknowledges that he's kind of annoying that way. Like, he is the obnoxious kid brother with just that scene with Saul, right? It's like get in the fucking house, where it's just this is time. It's time to actually do the job. It's time to be professional. And there is no sense that even when, you know, like Casey Affleck and Scott Conn are fighting, it's all performative. Even when it's just the two of them. Just the way they're introduced tells you not to take them too seriously, but it also shows you that they're resourceful and they're clever and there's a little more going on. It's the whole thing. It's like, at no point are we being conned. The movie, that's what I like about it. The movie is just really clean about presenting things to us.
You could argue in the third act you were being conned a little bit as the audience. You could argue that you were being misled on a plot point. You know, you were basically led to believe a certain thing, and then they flipped it on you. But that's also a trope of a heist movie, so you can't really blame them for doing that.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could argue that you were getting conned a little bit in the third act
but
as an audience
that's
member.
The pleasure of it, right? You're buying into it the same way you're buying into the scene of Pitt and Clooney walking out of the club. It's just it's what happens when you buy your ticket. Like, you know, certain things are you want these things to be delivered to you.
Right.
The weirdest thing about Ocean's 11 is it's the one Soderbergh film that doesn't feel divisive at all. There's nobody who doesn't like it. Like, it's just that people hated 12 at the time. I loved it.
I love 12. I
was trying so hard to get people to understand it and feel like, but it's stupid. It's like, no, it's great. There's no way. There's no arguing through it. You either buy it or you don't.
Yeah, 12's hard to get other people to like.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
But the bait and switch of it is so... Yeah, the bait and switch is so pleasurable, and it gives Damon the showcase that he wanted in the first... Like, Linus gets to step up, but he doesn't have any idea how to, and it's...
I would say 12 was like an inside joke that we were not let into. The audience was not allowed on that inside joke. It just felt like their joke that no one else got to enjoy.
Yeah.
You know, off the top of my head.
It felt to me like if... You know, it's the heist movie people would have expected from Soderbergh before they saw Ocean's 11. Like, if you heard he was doing this, it's like, oh, it'll be weird and convoluted, and there'll be stuff in it that's kind of strange, and I'm sure it'll all make sense in the end. And that is actually what that movie is. But it's also just about the heist is... That's the film where the audience gets conned. That's the film where the heist is played on us. Right. because you want a big happy movie where everybody runs around picturesque locations. And
well, that's the thing that most people did not like about it, was that they felt conned by the movie.
Yeah.
Like, the real heist was not that interesting, and the audience was the one who got heisted. Yeah, I had a lot of friends who were like, that was not good. And I was like, no, that's the joke. Like, it's the whole... Yeah, it was hard.
There is nothing in either of the other two movies, as much as I love the shot in the first one, there is nothing in either of the other two films that makes me laugh as hard as that incredible cackle that comes out of Julia Roberts when she rounds the corner and meets Bruce Willis.
Yeah.
Because it's human, right? Like, that's a moment where that is the response that a regular person would have meeting a movie star they didn't expect to meet. And she's obviously mimicking the response that she's been given thousands of times in the real world. That's all there, but it comes out as absolutely natural and real. And of course, Soderbergh being Soderbergh, he picked the one actor she co-starred with in fictional movies in The Player.
Incredible.
The idea that
incredible stuff.
Everybody was up for that joke. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, and you can see how that's kind of alienating when you get too deep in those meta weeds. I can understand why some people did not love it as much as we did. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, that's the point. If you have to explain it that far to somebody, they're going to just turn off. But I still got it, and I love it, so I win. You win. That's how that works.
I agree.
Yeah. Plus, 12 has the Catherine Zeta-Jones runner, which is kind of weird and sweet, and...
That's okay. I thought it was all right.
Yeah.
The Night Fox was the highlight of the 12. Like, you need a good villain.
Yeah, and he is.
The Night Fox was excellent.
Yeah, he's having a wonderful time, Vincent Cassel, just being ludicrous and European.
I agree.
Yeah. And it does strike me, too, that Ocean's 12 also builds on the last scene. It's not the last line of Ocean's 11, but one of the last things Tess says is Rusty needs a girl, or we got to get Rusty a girl.
Yeah.
And so... the sequel does fulfill all of the things that need to be fulfilled, in as much as Ocean's 11 doesn't need a sequel at all. But if you're going to make another one, here's all the stuff that we said we could tick off the list.
I mean, it was an interesting exercise in sequel, or making fun of sequels, whatever you want to call it. Is an interesting exercise in the sequel genre, if you can call it that. I haven't gone back and thought about it too much, but I'm an Ocean's 12 lover as well, which not many people are, as you probably know.
Yeah, and 13, I guess we can deal with that a little bit. I like it. It's fine. Nice colors.
Yeah.
It's it seems like, again, it's one of those things where, offered the opportunity to go play with his friends one more time, Soderbergh said sure, and then just walked away from the whole thing. It feels like the definitive ending. Like, they don't want to do an Ocean's 14.
I agree.
Yeah, and we could talk about Ocean's 8, but I got nothing to say, really.
Not much. Gary Ross, not that interesting to me, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think, if nothing else, it shows you just how important Soderbergh is to these movies.
I agree. And completely agree.
Also, I think if you're going to make a movie that's cast with all women, you should get a woman to direct it, because the rhythms will be better. There's clearly a space there that isn't working.
100%. Yeah, I was not a huge fan of Ocean's 8, but I see what they're trying to do. Yeah.
It's just one of those.
It's a franchise.
It is. It's a franchise. It's one of those movies where I like everybody in it, and I wish they got a better picture. And if they want to try again with an Ocean's 9, I'm willing to. I'll go back.
Yeah.
I like those people, but that's where you end up, right? You start with such a high of Ocean's 11, and then you can feel the studio chasing the dragon for 20 years trying to catch up to it.
Yeah, you can feel Soderbergh running away as well, running away from the dragon as much as he can.
Yeah, and he is just, again, Logan Lucky is kind of a companion piece in that it's a Southern fried process movie about a heist, but
sure.
Yeah, as you say, it doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really matter, and we're at no point at no point in that film are we really invested in the heist working out. But I'm just sort of fascinated by watching the nuts and bolts. And there's a moment in Logan Lucky where I'm positive Soderbergh left in a blown take, like just Channing Tatum hangs up a phone and Riley Keough looks at him and he just giggles a bit. And there's a moment, and there's a moment like that in Ocean's 11 too, which I only noticed this time through. The last time I watched it, there's a little bit of a thing that Brad Pitt does that makes me think it's a flubbed line or something. I can't even remember when it was, but I immediately thought, oh, Logan Lucky. And
Really?
yeah, I'll have to go back and look for it. It's somewhere.
Well, I gotta say, I did that when I made my movie, Stealing School. I that happened as well. There was a flub line, but we just left it in because it felt very natural. Someone was trying to say something and they messed up, and then they said the thing that they meant to say, and me and the editor was like, let's just leave that in. That looks great. It seems very natural.
Yeah. People, as you can clearly hear from me, people don't always speak in straight lines. It's there's plenty of room in movies for perfect clip delivery and in a mid-Atlantic accent and to remind us of screwball comedies of the 40s. But people stumble, people stammer, people forget.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I think as a screenwriter, I don't want to talk about Ocean's 12 too much, but in Ocean's 12, like, there's a line where George Clooney, people don't know how old George Clooney is.
That's right.
And he looks at Casey Affleck, he's like, let me ask you something. And then he turns to Don Cheadle, he says to Don Cheadle, he's like, let me ask you something. No, let me ask you something. How old am I? And like, those little things are like the hardest things to write for me personally, because they don't move the plot forward at all. They are just like little character things that are so true and so interesting and so funny, but they don't add to the story very much at all. But it's like, I don't know. I just think I'm very impressed with that type of writing, where it's not a part of the story, but it's a part of the characters, and it just, I don't know. Yeah, I'm always taken aback whenever I see something like that in a movie.
Yeah, and he's open to it. I think, like, more than most filmmakers, and even though he is a total control freak, he shoots his own movies, he cuts his own movies. Although he didn't cut Ocean's 11, that was still Stephen Marion. But he has room for humanity and these weird little moments of character from actors he trusts. He's just such a fascinating talent. I'm going to drop one more name. I promise this will be the last one. John Hodgman. When John Hodgman did the podcast, he told a story about being on the Nick and prepping for this big long speech and only being shot.
I know this.
Yeah, only being shot.
I think I know
back.
the story.
Yeah, because Soderbergh, because while he was shooting the scenes where they're shooting him from the back, he realized that Soderbergh wasn't going to shoot him from the front, and all this prep was for nothing. And it doesn't matter, because when you see the scene, it's exactly how it should work.
He does this in Ocean's 11 as well. I noticed this last night when I was rewatching it. In the scene where Danny and Benedict meet for the first time in the restaurant, they're kind of having this tense conversation about, is Danny staying at the hotel, whatnot. And if it was just like George Clooney and Andy Garcia, it would have been like kind of tense. But if you notice in that scene, the camera's only on Tess. Yeah. She's just watching back and forth, like this dialogue that's going back and forth. And I thought that was really cool, that it was like, oh, the scene's about her, and she's trying to make her decision in terms of, who she wants to be with ultimately. And I, as a lesser director, I probably would have put the camera on George Clooney and put the camera on Andy Garcia and let them duke it out. But but Soderbergh does things like that, where he has a whole scene where someone has a big monologue and puts the camera on someone completely out of the scene. And I heard he did that on the Nick as well. And I'm trying to break down why he does that specifically, because it always seems to be the right decision. I'm still learning as a filmmaker, obviously, but it's always striking when you see it.
Yeah, I think it's just what amuses him, right? I mean, he finds it interesting, and so he can't not use it.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. I mean, I guess it's unexpected. Definitely, it's super unexpected. I don't know why he does it, but I think it feels right.
Yeah. Oh, it almost always does with him. That's just why I keep coming back. So to that end, I guess we've touched on it a little bit, but is there anything of Ocean's 11 that you personally have lifted or borrowed or referenced or outright stolen for your own work? Is there a piece of the film in your own creative DNA?
Like I said, I've always thought Ocean's 11 is a movie about making movies and just putting the joy of making movies in some whatever genre you want to choose to throw it into.
Sure.
I don't know. That's an excellent question. I think there's always a joy or some pleasure, internal pleasure, when you and a group of ragtag people get together to do a job, whether that's to make a movie, to pull off a plagiarism tribunal, in my movie, to do anything. And I think I tried to incorporate a little bit of that into the movie, where it's just a group of people who are trying to pull off a job, essentially, with their own agendas. I think from Ocean's 11, that's the only thing I can pull. Yeah. Unfortunately. And also in Ocean's 11, I should say that Jin Yang, the Chinese character, only speaks Mandarin. The entire movie, he only speaks Mandarin, but Brad Pitt understands everything he says. And the audience doesn't, and no one else understands, in the movie understands, but Brad Pitt understands. And I think there's a little bit of that in my movie, Stealing School, where the people in academia speak about their theses and their studies, whereas they all understand each other, but the audience is kind of left out and they don't really know what's happening. And it sort of creates this comedic effect, I suppose. Yeah.
Well, and that creates a sense of an exclusionary tier within academia that's like, we can feel it even if the characters in the movie don't sense it. We can see the barriers they're putting up to entry.
Yeah, and I played it for laughs. I hope it gets laughs, Yeah, and
it's so weird to not see these things with audiences anymore. There's just this...
I'm looking forward to looking at Twitter, the Twitter reactions. It's going to be great, yeah.
My thanks to Lee Dong, whose first feature, Stealing School, is available today on digital and on demand. Thanks also to Amy Saunders. She knows what she did. Lee's not on Twitter, but you can find Ocean's 11 on Blu-ray and DVD from Warner Home Entertainment. It's also available on iTunes and Google Play. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Norm Wilner and elsewhere on the internet at nowtoronto.com, where I'm writing about movies and hosting a bunch of podcasts. Go check them out. And you can find this podcast on Twitter at Semcast, SEMcast, and on the web at someoneelsesmovie.com. Our theme song is by The Last Year. If you like it or this show in general, say so. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts or wherever you've been enjoying us. Every little bit helps, it truly does. And check out the other shows on the Frequency Podcast Network. I'm very partial to Jordan Heath Rawlings' The Big Story, which continues to be essential listening every weekday. Stay inside, watch movies, wear a mask. I'll see you next week.